and welcome to Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise where we stop, listen, and share. We are back, ladies and gentlemen, one more week. Glad to have you all here along with us this week. I am Nate, of course, and I am joined by Shiva. Shiva, how are you this week?
Yes, I'm fine. I'm great. How are you?
I am good. I am good.
How was your week?
My week was good. Busy, but good.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's funny. Both of us got fired, Shiva, but it feels like I'm even busier now than before I got fired.
Oh, yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Gloria.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Are you JK?
No, I'm Nate. JK is the man behind the scenes, making sure the show runs correctly.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, nice to meet you. Nate.
Yes, ma'am.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too. And I'm joined by Shiva and Amar. All right. So I guess we just want to kind of get started with a few questions to kind of familiarize you with our audience, Gloria.
Okay.
If you could just kind of let them know a little bit about your background and some of the work that you do.
Okay. My background is that when I was a child, I was sexually, psychologically, and physically abused by my own father, as were my two sisters and my brother. And so I grew up with very little self-confidence, very little self-esteem. It took me a long time to get that confidence. And I went through counselling. Eventually, I got that confidence when I started to train as a social worker. I started off as a research metallurgist, research scientist, and that was because I didn't have confidence, and you don't have to have confidence if you're sitting in front of a microscope, just you and it. It doesn't ask you questions. And then I decided halfway through my career, when I started to feel a bit more confident, to change into working with people. And I very much liked working with older people at the time. Now I am one. I'm not sure that I would go back there, but hey, I was young at the time. Worked with older people in a day centre that was run by one of the local councils in London, in the UK. Ended up managing a day centre and then thought, well, I think I did my management qualifications and I thought, I really would like to train as a social worker because I can see a lot of these people who come to the day centre need a lot more input than that. So I managed the day centre, and at the same time, I had a day off and studied once a week and became a social worker. But that's where my problems really started, because when I was training to be a social worker, I was on placement. They put students on placement in teams, and I was in a social work team that worked with people with learning disabilities. And I had to have my own clients and get to know them and work with them. And one day, I was allocated a client, and he was she was a woman, an adult woman with learning disabilities, and she was married to quite an elderly, frail man, and they had two grown-up children. I went round to their house for a visit one day. The wife was out, so I sat talking to, oh no, I've missed a bit. Before that happened, I got a phone call from one of their adult children, a girl, and she disclosed to me that their father had sexually abused them when they were children. At the time, I was just sort of living normal life, but that and made notes in the file, etc., and went out on this visit. And when I had to sit talking to this this elderly frail guy who'd abused his daughters, suddenly something triggered in me, and I actually, I truly wanted to strangle him.
Mm.
And he sort of morphed into my father. And I thought, I don't know how I stopped myself. Got to get out of here, double quick. And I managed to get out. And at the time, my manager in my social work team said to me, unless you go and sort this out, you won't be able to qualify as a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and got counselling. And during that counselling, all sorts of memories came up for me of my childhood. Very painful experience, but managed to work through it, and learned a lot about myself and about my behaviour as an adult, the lack of parenting skills for my own children.
Mm.
All the things that I'd always felt guilty and bad about, I realised, that things like when you're a child, you think, first of all, you think that sort of abuse from someone who ought to love you was a way that they showed you their love, because you knew no better. And it wasn't until you started to realise that there's something wrong here, this is different to other families, that, you sort of think to yourself, well, I must have done something. I must have allowed him to do it. And you feel guilty and you feel like it's your fault. And I learned during that counselling that actually it was not my fault. And a great burden lifted off me because it was solely and completely his fault. And I thought, I'd gone through all this, and how many survivors of abuse are there out there that haven't been able to deal with it? And so that's when I thought, when I retired from work and I'd gone into the area of safeguarding, I thought, I'm going to write books that will highlight this issue that is still so huge. And in fact, we're discovering more and more, not just from famous people, just ordinary everyday people. And so I thought, I will write a book about my life for a start, because that's what I knew about. And I was learning to write adult books at the time, because I've written loads of children's phonics books, teaching children to read. And I was given this free course, learning to write a book in a year. So I thought, I'll do that. I'll have to find something I know about to write about. And so I decided to do that. Wrote my first book, which was One Small Word, Surviving Childhood Abuse. And that was about me up to the age of 50. And after that, wrote a sort of sequel to that, which is called No, because the one small word was no. And when I was 14 and I said to my father, no, he stopped. And then you feel guilty because you think, why didn't I say that before? So I wrote those two books. And then I thought, I need to do more than this. I need to champion the cause of survivors. And so that's why I started posting very regularly on social media, highlighting issues to do with abuse. And I thought, well, I've written my life story. What can I do apart from that? And so I decided to, again, learn how to write a fiction book, which is a completely different process. And I'm now on my second. So I wrote and published a book called Shattered Pieces Can Still Shine. And I'm currently writing, and that highlighted the issue of child abuse and homelessness and forced prostitution, sex, well, not really trafficking, was slightly trafficking in there. This latest book is going to focus mainly on human trafficking. So that's how I'm doing it. I'm now writing fiction books that focus on all different types of abuse that you can think of. And that's how I'm trying to keep that issue high on the public agenda, try and get rid of the stigma that stops a lot of people saying anything about what's happened to them, and in fact protects the abuser. And that has become my life's work at the age of 70.
And I think I want to stay here for a second, Gloria, because, I've talked about it on the show before, but, I was abused at 10 and didn't really come to grips with things until I was about 35. And
Really?
So I'm wondering, because I think when people think about, sexual abuse and child abuse, they picture the victim at that age as a kid, but they don't really associate, like, there are things that stick with the adult as they go through life that stem from that trauma. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that when a child is abused, it's a life sentence. You actually don't ever get rid of that. You learn to manage it. You learn to understand the things that trigger you to behave the way you do. And you have to continue to manage that for the rest of your life. And you have to, in my case, I had to tell myself, if that happened to me when I was a child, then I'm going to turn it around. Something negative, I'm going to change into a positive. And at least then it makes sense of what happened to me. I've been able to help other people. And so, I don't know what sort of helped you to actually deal with it, but that's not an easy thing to do initially.
I think for me, it's funny, because, well, it's funny now. I could say it wasn't so funny at the time, Gloria, but it was the end of a relationship that kind of spurred it on, and an argument that happened. And like, I was so angry in the moment that, like, because I had never told anybody what had happened. And I expressed to my ex what had happened. And she, and I credit her, because without that, I would have never gotten help. And she, in that moment, went from being angry with me to trying to help me. And I, got therapy and counseling and stuff like that. And it's still a process, like you said. There's still things that I know to this day can trigger me or cause me to feel a certain way. But that was kind of the moment that made me get help.
And have you found that you can help others who've experienced the same?
Yes, like I think that because I've always felt protective of children, and I've always felt like I've always been good. I'm a broadcaster, but I also been a teacher over times in my career, and I feel like I never knew why I was so good at kind of relating to the kids, and it after that, it was like, oh, that is kind of maybe a part of my trauma. Is like, I'm very protective of children and want the best for them. And so, it like you're saying, Gloria, it does allow me to help folks now, because I can kind of see myself and other people that are going through situations that I was going through, 5 years ago when I was kind of at my low point.
And I find still that somehow both abusers and people who have been abused gravitate towards me. So whilst I was when I was working full time, I experienced really bad bullying at work. I mean, obviously bullying again is abuse. But at the same time now, especially through all my posts on social media, people get in touch with me and I can help them. They know I understand, sort of thing. And how I try to help people is get them to write down bits of what they can remember, because I found that writing that first book about my first half of my life, extremely painful process, because you live it again. But once done, it's gone. So it's very hard for me to say, well, in the book, there's this, and this. I have to look at it to see, because it's like almost like just a forgotten memory. at the same time, I still find myself behaving in certain ways, and you know, you have to be careful of that. So
what, in terms of like the work that you're doing now, what is it that gives you the most joy, Gloria? Like, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning that you're passionate about when it comes to helping folks?
I just love writing, to tell the truth. Mm-hmm. That's what gets me up in the morning. That's how I can get lost for 8 hours at a time. And that's how I can be in whatever story, and the characters become real, and they take you on a journey that you didn't intend to go on, however much you plan it. I find that is so exciting. But just as exciting is the way that I'm discovering, not just online, but amongst friendship groups at the church that I go to, just everywhere. People are ready to disclose if they know you've experienced. And just that, for me, that's a kind of God-given task in life. I know this is the last bit of my life. I haven't got, well, if I live to 100, I've still got 25 years. That's not bad.
you got at least a good 25 left, Gloria.
At least. I'm determined to live to at least 100. But you know, I want to do. In honesty, I've got quite a strong faith, and I just want to do what God wants me to do, and He wants me to be there to help people who've gone through what I've gone through.
Well, I do want to allow Shiva and Amir to ask questions, but I did want to touch on that point really quickly, Gloria, because I know there are a lot of people who have been through this trauma and this abuse, and some of that has stemmed from the church or religious figures in their life. And so for somebody that's gone through that, how can they kind of reconnect with faith or spirituality when that's kind of what hurt them in the first place?
That's a hard one, isn't it? You have to come to terms with the fact that the people who might have been connected with the church, especially the Roman Catholic Church, although not only, I mean, that's the one that's been in the most, mostly in news, but you have to realise that's not God. It's not God that's making them do that. It's them. And that actually God is trying to look after you there whilst that's happening. So, you know, in all honesty, I think what you come to realise is no matter who has abused you, the only way you can feel completely free of it is to allow God to forgive those people, to accept that God's going to forgive those people if they're sorry, and to learn to forgive too. Because all the time you're not forgiving, it's you that's suffering, to be quite honest with you. Hardest thing in the world to do, but it's true. So I had to learn to forgive my father. I tell you, I faced my father when I was an adult with children, 3 children, and I faced my father with it and said, you know what you did. If you can just apologise to me, I can forget it. And we can be a proper family. And he denied he ever did it. And that hurts a lot. And then my mum supported him. And us kids knew that my mum knew what was going on, but she wasn't strong enough. He was a very aggressive man. So in some ways, you know, I had to forgive my mum as well, because I thought, I've never let my children go through that. How could you have done that? I can't answer that even to this day, except to say she must have been very scared of him. So I think forgiveness is the key, and it's harder for those people who've been abused by somebody who's a member of a church. But their weakness, everybody's got weaknesses, and their weakness happens to be really not very nice. You know, all sins, as I say, it's a very cliche word, isn't it, sins? But there's no differentiation between one sin and another. you know, somebody does that and you think that's the worst thing that anybody could ever do. But that's not what I believe. I think, you know, if I nicked a pen from work, that's a sin too. And God doesn't differentiate between them. So how can I? But it's taken me a long time to get to that place. Honestly, mate, it's easier said than done.
Yes, ma'am. Shiva, do you have something that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, yes. From your newsletter, is it domestic abuse or anger management problem? Can you talk about
domestic abuse?
Yeah, it says domestic abuse or anger management problem.
What?
Your newsletter, from your newsletter, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot about domestic abuse in there, isn't there? And that's because I think at the moment there's a lot of progress being made to deal with domestic abuse, to understand the fact that when a couple, when they're having problems in their marriage, they're also abusing their children by the atmosphere, by what they're doing, etc. And that we're only just coming to realise that. So children that are from domestic abuse ought to be supported and helped, because it can affect them for the rest of their life. People that, when you get, I know men abuse women and women abuse men, but there are more men than abuse women statistically. And it's hard for women to leave a home when a lot of domestic abuse involves psychological stuff. So a man is able to make a woman feel, or a woman up the other way, but I'm saying about a man, they can make a woman feel worthless, confused because they keep changing the goalposts, feel unable to actually leave the relationship because they've been convinced that they're totally dependent on their partner. And I'm glad, certainly in this country, there is support for women who feel that they need to get out of that environment, and they get help in doing it in a safe way. My own daughter suffered domestic abuse, which was really difficult for her. She was in a relationship, and she didn't say anything to me because you don't. You're made to feel ashamed that it's all your fault. And when I discovered it, it was after the guy had broken her arm and pulled her hair out and, sounding crude, but peed on her, which is considered to be sexual abuse, apparently. So, and she suffers now with post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's at least 6 years ago now that it happened. The guy was imprisoned for, I don't know, I forget what the charge was, but it's not left her, and there's not enough counselling around to get her that help. And now she is suffering abuse at work, and it's sort of almost following the same pattern as I did. But of course, she wasn't sexually abused when she was a child, thank God. But domestic abuse is a difficult one, and a worsening one, and especially in the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
Really, really bad, because people were stuck, couldn't get away, and it's and that's, I don't know about the US courts, but the UK courts had so many cases and they got so far behind, and people were just getting abused left, right, and centre and couldn't escape.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that, Gloria, like what effect, just in general, the pandemic has had an effect on people's mental health, but specifically when you're talking about abuse, you just talked about it a little bit, but can you get into more about the last 2 years and what it's kind of meant as a whole to the way that people have dealt with this issue?
I think the last few years have forced a lot of isolation, and that has supported abusers, because isolation is one of the tools that they use. They don't want their victim to go out with friends, to do anything that might mean that they would tell other people about what's going on. And of course, all sorts of things have had to close down all services, etc., because of the fact of the pandemic. So it has made it really bad. It's hard to know what's happening now. We have to wait for the old statisticians to do their research. But certainly the things that are coming out show you that there's been an increase in domestic homicides, and it's, you know, down to abuse. Well, no, all types of abuse. So I don't know how long that will take. We're stuck with COVID now, aren't we? Forever. But at least in the UK, we've kind of normalised our life, as it were. You've got the same in the US.
Yeah, it's almost funny how it's just kind of become something we're living with now.
Yeah, just like flu.
Yeah, versus, you know, a year ago or 2 years ago where everything was shut down.
Yeah, and everybody was absolutely scared stiff of getting COVID. But now people are getting it once, twice, 3 times, and it's kind of just like having bad flu, really, after having all the vaccinations. So.
Yeah, like at my day job 2 years ago, like it was, if you got diagnosed with COVID or if you tested positive, you had to be out a minimum of 2 weeks. Now it's like 3 days.
Yeah,
and it's
like, and most people who got COVID at the beginning ended up in hospital. A lot of them on ventilators. A high majority of them dying. So there's been a lot of progress with that, but it was scary at the time.
Yeah.
Have you had it?
I have not, fortunately. Well, I say I have not, but who knows? Like, I could have been asymptomatic and not known it. But I haven't. I have lost a couple friends to it, so it's kind of hit home in that way. But fortunately, like, my immediate family hasn't had it.
Well, I've had it, but having had 3 vaccinations, it just like having flu, I must admit.
Got you. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, I got vaccinated. My family got vaccinated. My friend that passed, unfortunately, he didn't, and he's not here today. So, but yes, the majority of my immediate family did get vaccinated, and so we've been fortunate, I guess, to not have got it.
Yeah. There's an awful lot of people sort of refusing to have it and thinking it's some sort of government underhand plan, and I sort of think, oh, look around you, there's people dying that haven't had vaccinations, but everybody's to their own choice, but you take your chance, don't you, that way.
Amer, did you have any questions for Gloria?
Yeah, nice to see you, Gloria, here. Yeah, I got many things from you about child abuse. Yeah, I have questions actually. What happens if someone got abused as a child? Can you describe it?
Can you repeat that, please? Because I didn't quite catch it. It's not very clear. Would you mind repeating that?
What he meant to say is, like, if as a child he has not been abused, you don't have that experience, right? As you said, you have been a victim from the childhood, you have been abused. And most of the cases that the victims we talk with, people who are passionate about abuse and child abuse are themselves a victim.
Yes.
So if he is not abused, how is he going to understand the pain of the victims?
You have to learn. There's plenty of courses out there. plenty of courses. I spent the last bit of my employment life, well, I was self-employed, and I was training people how to recognise the signs, listen to people that have been abused and discover how it made them feel. There's plenty of signs of abuse. You've got to become vigilant to it. You've got to see the signs and recognise it, and you've got to have the confidence to actually report it. If you suspect that a child is being abused, if you're wrong, it doesn't matter. If you think there's even a chance, you have to report it. But get yourself trained. That's the important thing. I mean, in the UK, there's plenty of training for recognising all the different types of abuse. How, you know, how a child will keep silent, but you can tell by their whole attitude. They lose their confidence. And children will often express their feelings using artwork and things like that. But to recognise any type of abuse, get trained. That's the answer to it. I think although it's hard when you've not been abused yourself, although thank God you haven't, it's hard to feel that empathy. I think you were talking about that, Nate, weren't you? That because you've been abused yourself, you felt that empathy for children. You felt that's something. If you haven't, then the only way is to learn. There's plenty of people working in child protection that have never been abused themselves. Plenty of people. My daughter works with children. She's never been abused herself. Well, not until now. She's getting bullied, but as a child, she never suffered child abuse. So you can learn. I think everybody's got responsibility to learn, because unless we all can recognise the signs of abuse, abusers will get away with it, you know.
And how often, Gloria, do the victims of abuse actually become the abusers themselves? Is that something that happens a lot?
Question. Yeah, I don't know the figures, but I do know. I mean, in my last newsletter, I put that's about or was it something I read before? I do a lot of research, so I can put stuff in my newsletter that's relevant. But a lot of people, they're never discovered to have suffered child abuse until they become an abuser themselves. Then they get the support. Then they discover it was the fact that they never had any support in the first place. Because children in my day and age, you wouldn't be believed. If you said to somebody what was happening, you wouldn't be believed. And if they did believe you, you would be taken out of the house and put in a children's home. And despite anything that your parents do to you, you still love them. You can't help it. As you grow up, that changes a bit. But as a child, it's an innate bit of your relationship and a confusing bit as well. So, yeah, I lost my track there. I just lost what I was thinking. That's an age thing. Never mind, ask me another question.
Shiva, do you have another question, Gloria?
Yeah, then how to stop this abuse? How to stop this kind of abuse?
How do you stop abuse? By educating people, because that's the only way you can do it. By educating people to recognise it, and by providing support services for those that have been abused and those that abuse. That's the only way. That really is the only way to deal with it. I don't know how else. And the government, certainly in my country, haven't got enough money. So charities are the ones that do the vast amount of work, do you know? That's just life at the moment. Government's a short of money.
What's your opinion, Gloria, on what should happen to abusers? Like, is this, should they be locked away forever? Is there rehabilitation? What's your opinion on that?
Part of me says that anyone who sexually abuses a child should go and get operated on. Part of me says that. That's the part of me that was abused.
Yeah.
When you see children that have been abused, you think that guy should just be put away somewhere. Yes. And whatever they do to stop you wanting to have sex with anybody anymore. On the other hand, usually abusers are the subject of their own background. And there's part of me that thinks, oh, my word, what did they go through that's made them into this person? Now, I discovered that my father was like he was because that's how his father was too. And my brother's younger brother was the same, only he would abuse little boys. And he would go into children's care homes and working them, befriend the children, bring them home at Christmas, only to abuse them. And he was, in the end, he was put in prison. So not a very choice family I've got, have I? But my brothers and sisters have all turned out just as lovely as me. That's what we tell ourselves. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that like it's a very human reaction to just like you're saying, like just lock them away, throw away the key, make sure they can never do this again. But you're right. There does need to be a way to end the cycle somehow. Like there's got to be a way to break that pattern.
I don't know how they do break the pattern.
Yeah.
Because that is an innate part of that person, isn't it? How they change a person. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's an answer to that.
And they've got to want to change too, because you can't force somebody to change.
Yeah, absolutely. But for parents of children that when parents discover their children have been abused by someone, I'm sure that they think the best thing to do to that person is kill them. I'm sure I would feel like that if it had happened to my children. I'd want to strangle them more than I wanted to strangle that elderly guy that became my father. So it's a very emotive subject, isn't it?
Yeah. JK, I know you're behind the scenes today, but did you have any questions for Gloria?
Yeah, Gloria, again, thanks a lot, and we really appreciate it. And I wanted to share to our audience about your website as well. As an author, established author, and award-winning author, you have a excellent track record of how to support the survivor, and we are just trying to begin and understand. So the struggle here is, as such, you yourself mentioned that like the dichotomy is, what do we do? Do we castrate them, or abuse are different types, and sexually abuse and rape are difficult for us to judge. And as a victim, if the victim also out of emotion, they want to kill the other person. So we cannot wrong something by doing another wrong. Killing somebody is also wrong. So the problem here, I'm struggling to understand, even when you said educate, bring in awareness. So what is there to educate when people who abuse are also an educated one? Highly educated professionals do these kind of things. So
that's not going to do anything to change them. There's nothing, I don't think there's anything that you could do. Well, there are services that do support abusers, and abusers learn to control themselves, I suppose. But the main way is of other people noticing what's going on. I think that's the only way to stop it, JK. I don't think that there's any other way. And that's the conclusion I've come to, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing, raising awareness as much as I can. So, I mean, perhaps I don't know how far on your country or your state is as far as making abuse a high-profile issue. But I think that's, you know, I wish I had a magic answer that said, you just give them a pill and that will change them. Or, you know, you just put a label around their neck, beware me, I'm an abuser. But that's just not going to do anything. And I can see no other way but teaching people to be aware of the signs that somebody is being abused or somebody is actually abusing. Because I, as a victim, if I'm standing next to somebody who's actually abusing, I get the vibes. I just know. And that's happened a few times, which is an uncomfortable feeling because you can't abuse somebody, but you can keep an eye on them. I don't know what the answer is to the issue. I think, well, the only thing as far as I'm concerned as a Christian, I just believe that with God, nothing's impossible. And so things that we think are impossible, perhaps we should pray about them more and you know, let God deal with it. Because I really don't know how we're going to, apart from raising people's awareness of the signs, because it's the signs that you need to recognise.
And I think a lot of people don't, you know, we've talked about this here on the show about a number of different issues, whether it's abuse or human trafficking or, you know, racism or income inequality. A lot of people don't care about an issue unless it directly impacts them or those around them.
You've hit the nail on the head. That is absolutely true. So people are not interested in learning about something that hasn't immediately impacted them. And that's the difficult thing. But a lot of, I mean, I think the films that are being made showing people's stories do have an impact on the audience, and that people then start to feel more empathetic or sympathetic towards those issues. But, you know, when I'm writing my books on the abuse, I have an editorial group, which is a group of about 8 to 10 people who maybe are friends, maybe are people that I've just come across and are willing to do it. And I get feedback, I give them a certain number of chapters and they give me feedback. And, you know, the biggest feedback with these books is that's just not realistic. It doesn't happen. And I think whilst people are denying that things like human trafficking is going on, we're not going to get anywhere. So I just got to keep writing more and more, because at the moment, the book that I'm writing about is a young girl living in England who's actually trafficked by her teacher in the schools. And people saying that doesn't happen, but it does, because I do my research and I know it happens. And girls of 14, 13, even younger. Terrible things happen. So until people will believe that the unbelievable is actually true, real, and does happen, there's no way of dealing with it. So again, let's just keep throwing that information out there, talking to people. And I can talk, you might notice.
But we definitely appreciate you as we start to kind of wrap things up this week, Gloria. We definitely appreciate you taking some time to talk with us. You know, you've mentioned your books. JK just brought up the website. We've talked about the newsletter a little bit. For those who may be watching and want to learn more about you, you know, more about your work, maybe, you know, ways they can support the work that you're doing and how you're educating people, tell them a little bit about how they can find you and where they can see your work.
They can find me on my website, which is gloriaeveleighauthor.co.uk. Aha, brilliant. or gloriaevelegh.com for that particular book. Yeah, and you know, are you taken off my, yeah. Thank you for doing that, JK, if you can hear me. And I'm always happy for people to contact me by emailing. And my email address is gloriaeveleigh@icloud.com. That's it. Yes, brilliant. I'm always happy. And then should we need to speak face to face, I give them my telephone number. I don't mind doing that now. I do put my telephone number in, and my mobile number is 07930 411 419. And I'm happy to speak to anybody who even have never disclosed and just want to talk about it, so that I can help them get the confidence to get on that pathway to recovery, you know.
We definitely appreciate you, Gloria, and the time that you spent with us this week. Shiva or Amara, any final questions before we wrap things up this week?
Just to listen from Gloria, as you are a victim and you are fighting with to prevent this type of social issues. Yeah, thank you. So I have a question. So as a human being, what should our role to prevent this abuse, like abuse?
What should our role be? Talk about it, be vigilant, get trained. Simple.
And I think that the second one is very important too, because it's so easy to get caught up in our own stuff that we don't see other people's stuff. And it, you know, it does take, you know, being vigilant and being aware of what's going on with somebody else.
I think you Americans are much more open than us British. We tend to sort of keep ourselves to ourselves, yeah? British snobbery and all that. And, you know, my business is my business and this is my home. Keep your nose out of it, that sort of stuff. I believe, from what my granddaughter says, and she's in South Dakota at the moment at university, sports college, school, whatever you call it, that people out in America are much more open, much more easily sociable than the British people. And I think so you've probably got a head start in you know, keeping that issue going. It's keep bringing it up.
Thank you so much again, Gloria, for spending time with us again.
My pleasure.
Everybody out there, be sure to check out all of the links, and I'm sure we'll provide them in the descriptions, the email address, the newsletter, the books. We want you all to check all of that out because Gloria is doing great work. Gloria Eveleigh, we appreciate you for joining us from across the ocean, across the pond. Keep up the good work, and the last word is yours.
I'd say keep open. That'd be my last word. Be vigilant. Get yourself trained. That was more than one word, but you know, hang on in there and make sure other people are actually aware of what's going on.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Gloria, for Amer, for Shiva, and for JK and everybody here at Stop Now. I want to thank you all for watching. I'm Nate, and goodbye for now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.